I-18F, have been dealing with a really complicated family situation that recently came to a head. I have a half-brother Tommy, 8M, from my father Robert's, 42M second marriage to Jane, 35F. I guess I should start from the beginning to help everyone understand how things got to this point. My mom and dad had a really happy marriage from what I remember and what I've seen in old photos. She passed away from cancer when I was 6, and those first 2 years after her death were really tough. Dad struggled a lot being a single parent, but he tried his best. He met Jane at a work conference when I was 7, and they dated for about a year before getting married when I was 8. At first, things seemed okay. Jane was nice to me during their dating period and the first few months of marriage. She would take me shopping, help me with homework, and even started teaching me how to bake. Looking back now, I realize she was just putting on a show for my dad. Things started changing slowly after they got married. She became more distant and would often make excuses to not spend time with me. The real change happened when Tommy was born when I was 10. From the moment he came home from the hospital, it was like I became invisible in my own house. Jane completely stopped paying attention to me unless she needed something done. She would cook these elaborate meals for Tommy, but when it came to me, she'd just tell me to make a sandwich or heat up leftovers. When I told Dad about this, he said I was old enough to make my own food and needed to stop being jealous of a baby. As Tommy grew older, the favoritism became more and more obvious. Every single one of his achievements, no matter how small, was celebrated like he had won an Olympic medal. When I got straight A's in middle school, they didn't even bother to look at my report card. Jane would spend hundreds of dollars on clothes for Tommy but would tell me to be grateful when she bought me the bare necessities for school. The worst part was watching my relationship with my dad deteriorate. Before Jane, he used to be my best friend. We had this tradition of having Sunday morning breakfasts together where we would make pancakes and talk about everything. After Tommy was born, he stopped doing that, saying he was too tired from taking care of the baby. I understood that having a new baby was tough, but even after Tommy grew older, Dad never brought back our Sunday tradition. When Tommy started school, things got even worse. Dad and Jane never missed any of his school events. They would take time off work to attend his soccer games where he mostly sat on the bench, but they couldn't make it to my debate competition where I won first place. They always had some excuse: work meetings, doctor appointments, or Tommy being sick. Last year during my final year musical performance, I had a solo part that I had practiced for months. I was really excited because they had promised they would come. I kept looking for them in the audience before my performance, but they weren't there. They texted me saying Tommy had a bad cold and they couldn't make it. I was heartbroken but tried to understand. Then the next day, I saw Tommy's Instagram post about how much fun he had at Disneyland with Mom and Dad. They had lied to me and chosen to take him to Disneyland instead of coming to my performance. The breaking point came 6 months ago when I got accepted into my dream college. I had worked really hard and managed to get a partial scholarship that covered 60% of the tuition. I needed help with the remaining amount and went to talk to Dad about it. He straight up told me they couldn't afford it because they were saving for Tommy's future. This came just a month after they had spent nearly $5,000 on a gaming setup for Tommy's birthday. They had bought him a high-end gaming PC, multiple consoles, and tons of games, but apparently had no money for my education. I was devastated and didn't know what to do. That's when I remembered my mom's sister, Aunt Shelley, 39F. She's a lawyer in another state and I hadn't seen her in years because Jane always made excuses whenever she tried to visit. I decided to reach out to her and tell her everything that had been happening. Aunt Shelley was furious when she heard my story. She started asking me questions about my mom's life insurance and other financial matters. When I told her I didn't know anything about that, she got even more concerned. She still had copies of some of my mom's documents and started going through them. That's when she found out about the college fund my mom had set up for me before she died. According to the documents, there was a significant amount of money that was supposed to be transferred to my name when I turned 18. When I confronted Dad about this, he completely broke down. He confessed that he and Jane had used up all my college fund. They had spent it on renovating their house and paying for Tommy's supposed private school fees. I was shocked and heartbroken. The money my mom had saved for my future, working extra shifts even while she was sick, had been stolen by my own father to provide luxuries for his new family. I told him I would take legal action and he started begging me not to. He promised he would pay me back, but I knew it was a lie. They had already spent all their savings on Tommy and were always complaining about money. When I didn't back down, he tried to guilt-trip me, saying I would destroy their family and make them homeless. Jane even sent Tommy to my room crying and asking me why I wanted to hurt his mommy and daddy. That's when Aunt Shelley stepped in. She helped me file a case against them, and during the investigation, even more shocking things came to light. Not only had they used up my college fund, but they had also been collecting Social Security benefits in my name after my mom's death. Money that was meant for my care and upbringing had been going into their pockets for years. The total amount they had stolen from me came to around $180,000. The court ordered them to sell their house to pay me back. They tried everything to make me drop the case. They cried, begged, threatened, and tried to use Tommy to emotionally manipulate me. But I couldn't let them get away with stealing my future. My aunt offered to let me live with her and help me with college. Because of the financial fraud case, Child Services got involved and started investigating them. They found evidence of years of emotional abuse from Jane and neglect from my dad. Yesterday, they decided to temporarily place Tommy with my aunt while they investigate further. Now my dad and Jane are saying I destroyed their family. Some relatives are telling me I went too far and should have forgiven them for Tommy's sake. But I don't think I'm wrong. They stole my money, emotionally abused me for years, and tried to ruin my future. Ida for letting this happen to them? Update 1 first, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. The support and advice I received helped me stay strong through everything that happened in the past 2 weeks. A lot has happened since my last post, and I need to get it all out. The investigation into my dad and Jane's parenting revealed things that were worse than anyone could have imagined. What started as a financial fraud case turned into something much bigger. The investigators found out that Jane had been misusing Tommy's ADHD medication. She had been getting prescriptions from multiple doctors and selling the pills. They found over 20 prescription bottles in her name from 6 different doctors across 3 counties. The way they discovered this was actually through Tommy's school records. When the investigators were looking into his attendance records, they noticed that he had been falling asleep in class regularly and his teachers had reported unusual behavior changes. Sometimes he would be extremely hyperactive and other times completely zoned out. This raised red flags and they started looking into his medical records. That's when they discovered that while Tommy did have an ADHD diagnosis, the amount of medication prescribed to him was way more than what a child his age should be taking. Jane had been doctor shopping, going to different doctors with the same complaints to get multiple prescriptions. She would then only give Tommy a small portion of the medication and sell the rest. The investigators found text messages on her phone arranging meetings with buyers. She had been selling each pill for $25 to $30, making thousands of dollars each month. When they confronted her about this, she tried to blame it all on one of Tommy's teachers, claiming the teacher had pressured her into selling the pills. But they found her lie pretty quickly when they checked her bank records and found regular cash deposits matching the timeline of her text messages. My dad is now trying to claim he had no knowledge of Jane's illegal activities. He's been telling everyone that he's just as shocked as the rest of us and that he wants to get sole custody of Tommy. He even came to my aunt's house crying about how Jane had betrayed him and begging us to help him get Tommy back. I almost believed him until the investigators found text messages between him and Jane discussing the money they were making from selling the medications. There were messages where they talked about which doctors to target and how to space out the appointments to avoid suspicion. They even joked about how easy it was to get prescriptions if you knew what to say. The most disgusting part was a message where my dad suggested they could get more money if they increased Tommy's dosage prescription. He knew exactly what was happening and was actively participating in endangering his own son. The private school revelation came as another shock. During the financial investigation, they were trying to trace where all my college fund money had gone. My dad and Jane had claimed they used a large portion of it for Tommy's private school fees. When the investigators contacted the prestigious private school they had claimed Tommy was attending, the school said they had no record of any student by that name. They checked other private schools in the area but found nothing. Finally, they discovered that Tommy had been enrolled in the local public school all this time. My dad and Jane had been lying about the private school for years. They had been telling everyone, including their families, that Tommy was going to this expensive private school, but in reality, they had been pocketing all that money. When Tommy came to live with us, he was really confused and scared at first. He didn't understand why he couldn't go home or why his parents weren't coming to get him. After a few days, he started opening up to my aunt. He told us that Jane would make him memorize stories about his private school to tell relatives. She would coach him on what to say about his teachers and classes. If he made a mistake or told someone he actually went to public school, she would take away his toys and games for weeks. The house has been sold and I finally received most of my money back. The total amount came to $183,456 after including interest. My aunt helped me set up a bank account that only I have access to and is helping me make smart financial decisions. I'm starting college next month and even though it's not my dream school, I'm looking forward to this new chapter in my life. I decided to set aside $50,000 in a trust fund for Tommy. My aunt will be the trustee until he turns 18. I know none of this was his fault and I don't want him to suffer for our parents' mistakes. He's already been through enough trauma. Some of our relatives are still trying to guilt-trip me into dropping the charges against Dad and Jane. They keep saying that Tommy needs his parents and that prison time would destroy any chance of our family getting back together. My uncle, Dad's brother, called me yesterday saying I was being vindictive and that I should think about Tommy's future. But both my aunt and I agree that Tommy is better off away from them right now. He's already showing improvements in his behavior since he started getting his proper medication dosage. His new teacher says he's more focused in class and is actually participating in activities. He's also sleeping better and has started making friends in the neighborhood. The preliminary hearing is next week and both Dad and Jane are facing serious charges. My aunt says they're looking at significant jail time because of the prescription fraud and child endangerment charges. I know this is going to be hard on Tommy, but sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy. Update: 2 things have taken another unexpected turn in this whole situation. Last week, Jane's sister Lisa contacted my aunt with some disturbing information that has changed everything we thought we knew about Jane. Apparently, Jane has another son, Michael, 15M, from her previous marriage. She had completely abandoned him when he was 5 years old. Lisa hadn't spoken to Jane in almost a decade but had been keeping track of her through social media. When she saw the local news coverage about Jane's arrest, she decided it was time to come forward with what she knew. According to Lisa, Jane was married to a man named David for 3 years. They had Michael in the 2nd year of their marriage. Things were fine until Jane started showing signs of being financially irresponsible. She would spend all their savings on shopping and luxury items, maxing out credit cards and even taking loans without telling David. When David confronted her about their financial situation, she promised to change but instead started stealing money from his business account. She even forged his signature on loan documents. When he found out and threatened to divorce her, she cleaned out their joint bank account and disappeared for 2 months. David filed for divorce and got full custody of Michael since Jane didn't even show up for the custody hearing. The court ordered her to pay $800 monthly in child support, but she never paid a single cent. She would change jobs and move to different cities whenever the child support enforcement officers got close to finding her. This explains why she was so desperate for money and why she and my dad stole from my college fund. She had been hiding from her ex-husband all these years to avoid paying child support. The unpaid child support has now accumulated to over $100,000 with interest. David's lawyer contacted our aunt yesterday saying they're planning to file a lawsuit against Jane for the unpaid child support. Lisa also revealed that Jane had done something similar with her previous boyfriend before David. She had convinced him to invest his inheritance in a joint business venture and then disappeared with all the money. The boyfriend's family couldn't press charges because Jane had made him sign documents stating it was a gift. The trial for Dad and Jane is scheduled for next month. Their lawyer has been desperately trying to negotiate a plea deal, especially now with the additional information about Jane's past coming to light. But the prosecutor isn't interested in making any deals. He says the combination of financial fraud, child endangerment, and prescription drug charges, along with Jane's history of similar behavior, makes this a case that needs to go to trial. Dad's lawyer tried to separate his case from Jane's, arguing that he was manipulated by her. But the text messages they found proved he was an active participant in everything. His own messages showed he was the one who came up with the idea of using my college fund for their expenses. Tommy is doing much better now that he's settled into a routine at my aunt's house. He's seeing a child psychologist twice a week who specializes in cases of parental betrayal and manipulation. The psychologist says Tommy shows signs of anxiety and trust issues, which is understandable given what he's been through, but he's making good progress. He still asks about Dad and Jane sometimes, especially at bedtime. But he's starting to understand that what they did was wrong. Yesterday, he asked my aunt if he was a bad kid because his parents used his medicine to make money. It broke our hearts, but my aunt explained to him that none of this was his fault and that he was a brave boy for telling the truth about everything. I've settled into college life now. My grades are good and I'm actually enjoying my classes. The distance from all the drama has helped me focus on my studies. My aunt has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She's not only helping me navigate college but is also making sure Tommy gets all the support and care he needs. Some days are harder than others, especially when I think about how different things could have been if Dad and Jane had made better choices. But then I look at how much better Tommy's life is now, getting proper medical care and attention, and I know we did the right thing by exposing everything. Update 3: The trial ended last week, and I wanted to give everyone a final update on how everything turned out. Both Dad and Jane were found guilty on all charges. The trial lasted for 2 weeks and revealed even more disturbing details about their behavior that I hadn't known about. Jane got 5 years in prison for multiple charges including prescription fraud, child endangerment, and financial fraud. The judge was particularly harsh with her sentence because of her history of similar crimes and her complete lack of remorse during the trial. She actually tried to blame Tommy during her testimony, saying he was a difficult child and she only did what she had to do to manage his behavior. The judge wasn't impressed with that defense strategy. Dad got 3 years for financial fraud and being complicit in child endangerment. His sentence was lighter because he had no prior criminal record, but the judge made it clear that his betrayal of trust as a parent was a significant factor in the sentencing. During his statement to the court, he finally admitted to everything and apologized to me and Tommy, but it felt more like he was sorry he got caught rather than sorry for what he did. David, Jane's ex-husband, won his lawsuit for unpaid child support. The judge ordered that any future income or assets Jane receives must go toward paying the child support debt first. Michael, Jane's other son, is now 15 and doing well. He actually reached out to Tommy through our aunt, wanting to be in contact with his half-brother. They've had a few video calls, and it's been good for Tommy to know he has a brother who understands what it's like to have Jane as a mother. My aunt has been granted permanent custody of Tommy. The court agreed that she was the best option given her stable home environment and her commitment to Tommy's well-being. Tommy's doing really well in school now that he's getting proper medical care and support. His grades have improved significantly, and he's even joined the school's soccer team. His therapist says he's making excellent progress in dealing with his trauma, though he still has some bad days when he misses Dad. I'm doing well in college and have made some good friends. My aunt helped me find a part-time job at the campus library, which helps me save some money while keeping a flexible schedule for studying. I've developed an interest in child advocacy law after everything that happened, and I'm considering following in my aunt's footsteps. Dad's side of the family is still trying to guilt-trip me about the whole situation. His sister called me last week saying I should write letters to Dad in prison because he's still my father. I've blocked most of them on social media and my phone. The only ones I still talk to are my cousins who have been supportive throughout this whole ordeal. Sometimes I feel sad about how everything turned out, especially when I see other students with their parents during college events. But then I remember all the lies and manipulation, and I know I made the right choice. Tommy and I are finally getting the stable family environment we deserved with our aunt. Lisa, Jane's sister, has become a regular part of our lives now. She comes over for Sunday dinners and has been helping Tommy connect with his maternal relatives who had no idea about Jane's crimes. It's nice to see our family expanding in a positive way rather than being trapped in toxic relationships. Life isn't perfect, but it's definitely better than it was before. Tommy is safe and happy, I'm getting an education like Mom wanted, and we're both surrounded by people who genuinely care about us. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born into.